Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Welcome to episode 1463, and thank you for joining me today. And it is always an honor to be your guide through this financial life we live in, and not just financial life, but a little bit of life in general. You know, I was listening to the Flashback Friday episode, 1462, and wow, you know, the great ideas of history there are just some ideas that are just great, and they stand the test of time. When you look at some of the ideas that came out of, you know, the Roman Empire and from the great philosophers, and it is truly amazing how those great ideas, well, the great ideas from antiquity are still great ideas today, and how little things have changed in some ways, but at the same time, of course, how much things have changed at the same time. So as you may have heard last week on an episode, I told you that I reordered for maybe the 50th time the book Earl Nightingale's Greatest Discovery, which is such a great book. It's out of print. I got a hold of a used copy of it. Gosh, what's the copyright date on this book? 1987. And Earl Nightingale died in 1989. I believe it was March 25th, if I remember correctly. That was a date I noticed and will remember because he was such a great thinker and really shared so many great ideas and influenced my life in so many positive ways. And today we are going to have a great thinker. Jim Rogers, the legendary Jim Rogers, is our guest today. And let me tell you what a big deal Jim Rogers is. He's such a humble man, but this is his fourth time on the show. So he'd been on 3 times before, but the last time was like 7 years ago. So I had him back on the show. And when he had his hedge fund with his former partner, George Soros, yes, that was his business partner, and he doesn't like to talk about it. He says, if you ask me about my former partner, that's like asking me about my ex-wife. So I get it. I feel the same way about some people I've been in business with over the years, sadly. But that's the way it goes, right? Like my late grandmother told me many, many years ago, she said, Jason, the hardest ship to sail is a partnership. That's pretty good advice there. And that is why you should follow my commandment number 3. Thou shalt maintain control by being a direct investor, because then you don't have to sail the hardest ship, a partnership, the hardest ship. But Jim Rogers is such an interesting guy, and he wrote the book Investment Biker, which some of you may know about. It was a very famous book. And then the book that I really fell in love with his work was Adventure Capitalist, where he talked about how he and his, I believe, fiance, I don't think they were married yet, went around the world to 100-ish countries, give or take, in a customized Mercedes. And they just drove that thing all around the world. And he talks about capitalism around the world. And it was so fascinating, really just a fascinating book that I had listened to on audio and also read more than once. I don't know how many times offhand, but it was a great book. And I want to get into that in a moment here. But speaking of great thinkers and great ideas, I want to share with you a quote that I discovered at age 17 that I always liked by one of my very favorite writers, and that is Ralph Waldo Emerson, the good old Emerson. And this quote is really great. He says, To laugh often and much. I think I could learn from that. I don't laugh often or much, but I should do it more. Okay, so his quote, to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics, and to endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the beauty in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, a redeemed social condition, or a job well done, to know even one other life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. And that is, I don't believe that was in Earl Nightingale's great book, Earl Nightingale's Greatest Discovery, but it is a great quote. I think maybe I heard it first from Dennis Waitley, who is, by the way, where I learned about Earl Nightingale, from Dennis Waitley. And check out episode number 150. Dennis Waitley is on that show, and I was lucky enough to be able to interview him on the show. And these just great thinkers have such enduring influence. When I think of Jim Rogers and 4,200% return on investment in a decade in his hedge fund, and that was at the same time that the S&P, I think it was the S&P, maybe the Dow, don't quote me on this, did 47% in the decade. His fund earned 4,200%. Can you believe it? That's insanity. It's incredible. It's incredible. And when I think of these great thinkers and great authors and great thought leaders of our time, one of the passages from Earl Nightingale's book, I think, is encouraging to all of us to be one of these people, because we are the leaders of our own lives, and we've got to become the heroes of our own lives. And as far as your investments go, I'm here to be your guide to help you with your investment portfolio. But look, you have to be the hero, and nobody can do that for you. Only you can do that. That is your province, your agency completely. And it is amazing to me when you look at over time, over maybe 10 or 20 years, the rewards always go to the doers, and they always go to the risk takers. And sometimes the risk takers certainly lose, and sometimes they win, but you gotta go out and you gotta just take that risk alone. And Earl Nightingale talks about that in this book. And by the way, since this is not on computer, I can't search it. I was literally flipping pages to try and find this one great part where he talks about risk. I'll probably find that for an episode later this week, maybe. But one passage I did find that I really like here. And he says, William Lyon Phelps, former president of Yale University, used to say, quote, "The most interesting people are the people with the most interesting pictures in their minds." Think about that for a moment. The most interesting people are the people with the most interesting pictures in their minds, unquote. And then Earl says, it's like a double quote here. I'm quoting, Earl's quoting William Lyon Phelps, and I'm quoting Earl Nightingale. Okay, you get the idea. The ideas we hold that direct the course of our lives, pictures in our minds, our art gallery, we might say, and our facial appearance after 40, interestingly enough, is usually a reflection of that art gallery. We are told that our faces after 40 are our own responsibilities. It's only natural that they should mirror the contents of our minds. That's what makes so many middle-aged and older people beautiful and handsome, and so many not, unfortunately. In all the years of their lives, they have failed to put together a gallery of ideas that reflect good cheer, happiness, and hopeful expectation. Once again, it's the minority that realizes the importance of great ideas in our lives. Ideas are simply everything. A person can have beautiful features, but if great ideas aren't there, the resulting vacuum is quite apparent. And then, that's the quote I read to you on the last episode last Thursday. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and saw that life was duty. I acted, and behold, duty was joy. And Earl Nightingale goes on to say, There's an idea I hold from which I derive a great deal of inner peace and contentment. Anyway, this is just such a great book. It's unbelievable. Get it if you can. It's out of print, but available, used. And it's funny because speaking of ideas that people hold in their mind, in this book that I got from the used bookstore, there was a postcard dated 3/5/88 from the Lowe's Ventana Canyon Resort in Tucson, Arizona. And this is to Marcia Jacobs, the postcard. And I guess the person never sent it because they never put the address on here. But she was, Janet, who wrote this, was probably reading this book and wrote a postcard to her friend Marcia. And oh, human history. It's so amazing. And ideas that people have. So make sure that the ideas you hold in your mind are big ideas. And one big idea I want to share with you before we get to Jim Rogers. If nothing else went right and you had purchased properties from us, which I know many of you did, many of you listening did, back when I started in the investor-only business in 2004, and you got mortgages back then of $1 million, because remember, those mortgages back then were plentiful, and they weren't as cheap as they were today, but they were still cheap. You probably refinanced by now maybe a few times. You did the refi till you die strategy. But if nothing else went right, you made $357,000 by only one dimension of your multidimensional asset class, inflation-induced debt destruction. And that is not reflected on Property Tracker. It's not reflected in the store, the property store at jasonhartman.com. This is outside of that calculation, inflation-induced debt destruction. And guess what else? But wait, there's more, as they say on the late night sleazy infomercial. But wait, there's more. That only includes inflation calculated at the official rate, which we know is massively understated. That is a 35.7% return just on inflation. Nothing else. Inflation-induced debt destruction, because inflation pays off those mortgages for you. So it's pretty hard not to succeed with good quality income property investing with a good strategy behind it. But what does it take? It takes you being the hero of your own life. You got to do it. And maybe you're already doing it. Many of you are. But are you doing it enough? Should you be doing it more? Because to be the hero of your own life, well, how do we remember a hero? Well, they do something big, something significant. They don't just do the normal thing. They don't just do the conservative thing. They don't just do the easy thing. They do something great. They take a bigger risk. They take a bigger venture. And that is how they become the hero of their own life. So, without further ado, let's get to Jim Rogers. If you need us, reach out through jasonhartman.com or at 1-800-HARTMAN. And here is the legendary Jim Rogers. It's my pleasure to welcome back a returning guest, and that is the gentleman investor, Jim Rogers, back for his fourth time on the show. He really needs no introduction, but he's got an incredible track record with investing, and he wrote one of my all-time favorite books entitled Adventure Capitalist. That's one of many, but that was the one where I really just fell in love with his work, and he's gone around the world twice, once on a motorcycle, and he wrote about that in Investment Biker, and then in a custom-made Mercedes. That was Adventure Capitalist, and he's got many books since then. But it's a pleasure to have him back. Jim, welcome. How are you doing?
I am delighted to be here. Yes, 4 times. You're right. Wow.
It's great to have you, and it's been...
Aren't you tired of me by now?
No, never get tired of you. And okay. It's been 7 years since we had you on the show. So it's been a long time, but it's great to have you back. And I figured...
7 years since the last time? Oh, yeah. My gosh. What did I do wrong?
It was... It was February of 2013, but this is a time of extraordinary crisis and Keynesian money printing like crazy, Jim. I mean, what do you make of the world's response to COVID-19? I mean, where do we start, right? There's just so much going on nowadays.
Well, Jason, we've had many epidemics in history. This is the first time we've closed down the whole world. I'm not quite sure I guess the press or politicians or somebody panicked because, in 2009 in the U.S. we had the huge H1N1 virus. They didn't close down McDonald's. They didn't close Delta Airlines. Nobody closed anything. So I have a feeling that maybe we've overreacted. The cure can be worse than the disease at times, and I'm afraid that's what's happened. Not more worrying, but equally worrying, these guys have an election in November. Mm-hmm. They don't care about you, me, people watching this show, young people. They don't care about my kids. After the election, the amounts of money which have been printed and spent and borrowed is staggering. So America, since we're Americans, America's going to have a huge burden for a long, long time. Not just America. I mean, the Japanese are maybe worse. The head of the Bank of Japan goes to work every morning, turns on the printing press and prints as fast as he can. Yeah. Spends it as fast as he can. So, I mean, the world's making it. If you ask me, making big mistakes.
Yeah, it really is just, we thought it was unprecedented during the Great Recession, but look at it now. I was looking at a chart yesterday, Jim, that said that Japan has dedicated 21% of its GDP to the COVID stimulus, the U.S. 13%, but Japan by far the leader. And they already have 230% debt to GDP ratio and a declining population. So that mix, I don't think there will be a Japan in 50 or 70 years, will there?
Jason, hooray. I've just published 2 books in Japan this month. 2 books saying exactly the same thing. I had 2 number 1 bestsellers last year saying, guys, this is going to be a disaster. Say it again. Yeah. Call up the Japanese. It's going to be, there's not going to be a Japan in 50 years.
I know. They got to have some children or some immigration or fix their economy some way or another because it's just unbelievable what's going on there. But, Jim, one of the things you said years ago, which I was really, I'm super fascinated. I always have. Maybe it's been a morbid curiosity. You've been to many more countries than me, but I've got 87 under my belt. And I've always been fascinated by North Korea. And I was fascinated by one of your remarks about North Korea a few years back, saying that you thought it would open and it would become one of the most fascinating regions in the world. And there would be a lot of new labor available, obviously an inexpensive labor market that companies could exploit, for lack of a better word. Maybe that's not the right word. What do you think about North Korea now, especially with the sort of disappearance of Kim Jong-un? I don't know if he's back yet or not.
He reappeared.
Okay.
Don't worry. Yeah. He was down at the disco for a while. Yeah. Well, what I said was the Korean Peninsula, once the 38th parallel opens, is going to be an extremely exciting place because of a lot of cheap, educated, disciplined labor with natural resources, capital in the South, manufacturing in the South, 80 million people on the Chinese border. It's going to be extremely exciting once the 38th parallel opens. It's got everything. It's amazing. Yeah. But, it's not, you and I, we can't even go. I've been there twice, but it's not legal now for Americans to go. Right. So all we can do is talk about it.
Yeah.
We're from the land of the free.
Right.
We're not so free anymore.
Well, that's certainly true. And speaking of freedom, boy, in the Constitution, the First Amendment guarantees the right to peaceably assemble. You can't do that now. That's for sure. All of these lockdowns, the cure being worse than the problem, that is a very valid idea. What do you think is behind it? Is it a power grab by the government to just make the citizens more dependent, get more control over everybody? Any thoughts about that? Even conspiratorial thoughts. We entertain.
You know that the government, all governments, not just ours, wants more power, wants more control. They do every chance they get. They take advantage of it. So, of course, yes. Do I like it? No, of course not. I would like to push them back. And that's what the founders of the country did. But no, they all want all the power they can get. They'll seize it every chance they get. And that's what's going on now. Yeah. The idea that somebody can tell me I cannot go to the butcher or to the barber is lunacy. I mean, I live in Singapore where they're doing the same thing. I'm not picking on America, or I'm picking on everybody that's doing it.
I mean, look at India. I mean, some countries have much more severe lockdowns. I know you were on with my friend George Gammon recently, and he lives in Colombia. And, I talked to him yesterday, and they can only go out for 20 minutes a day, and they can only go to the grocery store once a week. I mean, it's bad enough in the U.S., but it's even worse in other places.
Well, as I understand it, 8 states did not lock down. And hallelujah, whoever they are, I should contribute to those governors. Sweden did not lock down. Austria opened up very quickly. So some people have realized, wait a minute, guys, let's check this.
Yeah. So this will make everybody much more dependent on government. But when we look at the debt problem, of course, the debt is increasing by the U.S. massively, but everywhere else it's the same. So it's all relative, right? Or is it?
No, of course it is. Well, nearly, yes. Everybody, North Korea is not increasing the debt, but everybody else is. You're right. No, of course, we're all. But that doesn't, just because everybody goes broke, you think that's good? But everybody will print money? That's not good. We're going to have what's they call modern monetary theory, and more money today, MMT, more money today, whatever it is. Suppose everybody does it. Yes, but is that good for the long run? Absolutely not. I mean, people have looked for free lunches since the beginning of time. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and I'm afraid we're all going to suffer. I know we're all going to suffer later.
And how will we suffer? Inflation? Is that the suffering you refer to when it comes to the debt and the money printing, just general inflation?
Well, certainly the debt is going to be staggering. In 1920, the UK was the richest there was no number 2 to the UK in 1920, but then they went nuts. They started borrowing money, spending money fast as they could. UK is not even in the top 20 now. Now, it's still there, but the standard of living relative to what they had in 1920 is far, far down. The sad part is that's what's going to happen to you and me and to my kids. I'm more worried about my kids than I am me. No, the standard of living will decline. The cost of living will go up. The cost of production. Mr. Trump says to everybody, let's bring the factories home. Well, okay, fine, do it. But that means if you get a TV, it's not going to be a very good TV if history is any indication, and it's going to be expensive. So our standard of living is going to continue to decline.
But that means more jobs in America. So that is there's a flip side to that equation, right?
Well, conceivably, yes. But if we're less competitive, maybe you'll have more people buying TVs in Illinois, but you're not going to have people buying much else from the United States because we cannot compete with the U.S. One of the problems that we have, the cost of production is skyrocketed for many, many reasons. And so that's why the economy keeps suffering.
We're in we have this rare malady going on of supply demand shock where, usually just demand falls off and you go into recession or depression, even worse. But this time it's a supply and demand issue. Now, I don't know if that'll continue, but certainly the supply chains have been disrupted. So, I mean, there's an argument to bring some of these supply chains onshore for every country, not just the U.S., right? So that, you can get ventilators and masks when you need them. You can't outsource everything, can you?
Well, you can, but you want to be, would you rather live in North Korea or South Korea?
Right.
The North Koreans, they do it all themselves. Would you rather live in North Vietnam or South Vietnam? Would you rather live in East Germany or West Germany? I mean, these countries don't exist anymore, but you remember. No, you can do it that way, but it's not a very good way to live. Rather live in Cuba or Florida? I'd rather live in Florida, No, you can do it, but it causes your standard of living and your country to decline. Not the first week. First week, everybody has a new job. 2 years later, 5 years later, the country is continuing to decline. As I said, that's what happened in the UK. But there are many examples in history where this has been done, and the country's gone into decline. We can do it if we want, but that doesn't mean things are going to be great for my kids or young people.
Meaning rise in consumer prices causing a declining standard of living. That's your point, right?
And less quality.
And lower quality because you're not outsourcing to, using the economic specialization of the best person or company or country for the job, right?
You sell on price. And if your economy is closed, You don't have to worry about competition. You don't have to worry about quality anymore. Oh, that bucket has a hole in it. Don't worry. You know, it's a bucket. You got a bucket.
That crappy GM car that was built in the 70s, right? Yeah.
You remember those cars?
Oh, sure.
You know, in 1965, General Motors was the single richest, most powerful company in the world. 50 years later, it was bankrupt. And you know what? The board of directors, the consultants came in Detroit and said, the Japanese are coming. And the board said, who cares? Go away and leave us alone.
Right.
50 years later, General Motors was bankrupt and Toyota was the biggest, richest car company in the world.
Yeah.
Sure, you can close off, but there's a price.
Yeah.
Maybe the current politicians won't care or know about it. But my kids will know, and they'll know in spades, and all young people will know in spades.
Sure. It takes a long time for this stuff to play out. But, you know, when we talk, you know, look back to before COVID, right, and all of the trade war talks, I call it a trade negotiation, not a trade war, but the media likes to call it a trade war. Given what's happened with the coronavirus outbreak and such, you know, what do you think of China's standing now? I know you've been very bullish on China or Asia in general. What's changed? Has any of your thinking changed about that in light of what's happened recently?
Well, I mean, my feelings were, and I've said for decades, that China is on the rise. I mean, it's a pretty simple thing. You think I was wrong?
Yeah. No, you were obviously right. I mean, listen, I was in Shanghai last year, and I couldn't believe it, Jim. I mean, it's an absolute miracle. I mean, and Shenzhen, same thing.
It certainly has been a miracle for 40 years. So all I was saying, listen, guys, China's on the rise, and you better pay attention. It's going to change. It has changed, and it is changing. Right now, there's a huge amount of anti-Chinese animosity in the U.S. I still can't quite figure it out. I sit and watch and say, what are they talking about? And then I also know it's dangerous, the kind of hysteria which is being built up. This is not good for anybody. I don't understand why. Why everybody's building up this fury? I do know that throughout history, Jason, when things started going wrong in a country, whenever things go wrong in a country throughout history, the politicians blame the foreigners. It's very easy to blame the foreigners. They have different languages, different skin, different hair, different everything, different religions. It's very easy to blame the foreigners. They smell bad. And their food smells bad.
They eat weird food. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe how many times I've heard people say, and their food smells bad.
Yeah.
You know, but that's what I'm not picking on America. I'm not picking on anybody. It's the way the people all over the world throughout history have worked.
Sure.
And at the moment, things are not great in America, and China's been on the rise. And so, of course, it's their fault. It's not your fault, Mr. Voter in Iowa. It's their fault. And that's what's happening.
Yeah. But what does it mean to China's future? I mean, China obviously has been an incredible story. No one could argue with that for even a New York Minute. But they do have a demographic problem coming. They've had that one-child policy. About 10, 15 years from now, that's going to be a pretty big impact on their economy. But then you've got this, and you've got these trust issues. And, of course, the intellectual property issue has always been there. But now you've got all this argument about, did they really tell the truth about the outbreak and so forth? And the WHO is even attacking them, and the WHO is not really on the side of the U.S. because Trump has, attacked the WHO.
Yeah,
so
it's strange. But in January and February, Washington D.C. was saying all sorts of good things about China and the way they handled the. I mean, if somebody can sit and say, yes, the Chinese plotted all this, set up this virus, spread it around the world. I don't know why they did that, but if that's what I said before. I cannot understand and believe some of the things I hear people saying.
Well, those are outlandish theories. I mean, why would the Chinese do that? It hurts them. They hurt themselves. I mean, it's been terrible for China, but it's just the issue of the reaction to the virus, right?
Well, that's back to the point. Yes. Yeah. It's reacting to foreigners. The foreigners, the Chinese foreigners in this case, have been on the rise. They have been very successful. So, of course, you blame it on them. Listen, the British 80 years ago blamed it on the Americans. It's all the Americans' fault. Yeah. There was a chance after the Second World War that Britain would go to war. The British were so furious. I mean, it didn't happen, but what happens people blame the foreigners. And that's what's happening now. You can sit and try to be reasonable with people and explain this, that, and the other, talk about history. They don't care.
Yeah, right.
Those people smell bad.
Right. And there's a very short attention span, sadly, so people don't seem to really think deeply or analyze anything in much detail anymore, unfortunately. So where are we going with this, Jim? I mean, we got a couple more minutes. What can we expect? Are we in a depression already, or is it just a recession? I mean, I know there's not exact definitions for depression.
We're certainly in a recession. Yeah. Probably everywhere in the world is in a recession now, which is not going to be cured anytime soon. Now, the markets are different from recession. You know, America is the largest debtor nation in the world, and in the last month, we spent trillions with a T and printed trillions, and they're going to do more. So, but not just the Bank of Japan. The guy goes to work every day and runs some printing presses as fast as he can and starts buying. So markets are different from economies, and markets are having a big rally. The rally will probably, maybe May will go down. It should go down after the big rally, but you know, I'm sure back by the summer, in Washington, they know the election is coming. They're going to do everything they can to make people happy until the election. No, I wouldn't short most markets unless you're a good short-term trader, because I would expect more of this madness will continue. This could turn into a bubble on the upside. On the upside, stocks, at least
because
in the
of the
United
stimulus,
States.
right? Is that what would make it a bubble? That, I mean, you know, the Fed is going in and buying everything. They're like an asset buyer now. They're the biggest investor on the planet, right?
Well, I don't know. The Bank of Japan, well, it's a tight race. Yes. Your point is very valid. It's a tight race because a lot of people are now spending assets. If I weren't talking to you, I'd probably be buying Japan right now because the Bank of Japan's got more money than I do, and all they want to do is buy stocks and ETFs. Is it sound? No, Japan's in serious decline. Is the market going to go up because, of course, Bank of Japan can make any market go up.
Yeah, it's absolutely unheard of the time we're in. So this could cause a bubble on the other end of it because of all the stimulus. Yeah.
Yes, well, not so much the stimulus because of the money that's being printed and spent and borrowed. Well, generally
call it
stimulus, but the money's going somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in America, they want to get it out as fast as they can because the election's in November.
And Jim, you referred to Wall Street and the markets. Well, in the foreign stock exchanges too. But what about the Main Street economy? And let's close with that. Just tell us what this means for the typical person, middle-class America, the Main Street economy, not the Wall Street economy.
This is doing serious damage. I mentioned to you the UK in the 20s. When they did this, their comparative standard of living declined enormously. It's happening in America. I'm going to use a Singapore example since I live here, but it's a little more neutral. I know a guy's got 5 restaurants. He's got a few restaurants, Michelin restaurants, not hamburger
nice
stands.
Restaurants, yeah. Well,
very nice restaurants. He basically... He's had to close everything. He's selling his wine cellar to stay in business. He's going to have over $1 million of debt within a month. Never had debt before. He's going to have no wine cellar. Now, he will probably come back. He might come back. He might not. But if he does, it's not going to be the same for him as it was 6 months ago. No, but there are many examples like that of companies that are being damaged dramatically and that have huge amounts of debt. But Illinois got a lot of debt and has a lot more debt now. The United States has a lot more debt now. No matter what you can tell me about how a free lunch is a free lunch, it's hard to maintain a rapid rate of growth when you have huge amounts of debt. And America, I mean, I don't like saying this. I'm an American. I got American kids.
Sure.
But I know history and I know what has always happened.
Yep. Nope. There's no question about it. That debt is a burden on growth. It really it makes an economy stagnant and just turns it into a zombie economy at some point. I guess the only thing we can hope for is that it's relative. So most others are in the same boat in terms of other countries. So if that's any consolation, I'm not saying
no. It's no consolation to me. What we as investors have to do is now we have to find the countries and the companies that are not going to go and say, a serious decline as other people. I mean, Japan, I told you, it's going to be a nightmare for Japan. But there are other countries, Korea, which is not going to be nearly as badly damaged. So as an investor, as a citizen, we have to find the places that will be damaged less badly. And unfortunately, I'm afraid I see what we're doing in America, and it grieves me. Yeah. It saddens me.
Yeah, and you've been saying that for a while, but now it's just accelerated dramatically with this. I mean, the money printing, Jerome Powell has got to be the most bold Federal Reserve chair ever. He is just like, yeah, you need more, go for it. He even supports Pelosi's $3 trillion, and he's a Republican. I mean, it's just, wow.
They all want to spend somebody else's money. Yeah. There's an election coming up. They should read it. The problem is they think they're smarter than history if they know history. And the great lesson of history is people do not learn the lessons of history. If they even hear the lessons of history, they ignore them and say, that's bunk. Right. I'm smarter than history.
Yeah. This time it's different. The famous last words of any investor,
well done.
Right?
Well done. This time it's different.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's late there, so we've got to wrap it up, but always appreciate having you on the show. Do you want to give out any website or anything?
No, I don't have anything to sell. Everybody should watch Creating Wealth. That's what everybody should do. No, I don't have anything to sell.
Yeah. And by the way, I got to compliment you. You're always so gracious. You do so many interviews. You don't need to do that. Like you said, you don't have anything to sell, but you're really getting the word out to the world. So, we appreciate it. The media in general, you're just always, we always see it. So.
Let me tell you, Jason, when I was younger, many people helped me in many ways. And even if I look like a fool, I would like to help people if I can, because when I was young, I can remember some of the guys that went out of their way to help me. And now I hope I can do some of the same for the world.
You're definitely doing the same for the world. And on behalf of the world, we appreciate it. I'll represent the whole world. How's that? Thank you so much, Jim.
Creating Wealth.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.